Welcome to the Educational Leadership Podcast, the podcast where education meets innovation and leaders like you transform schools into thriving communities. Join us as we guide you through the ever-evolving world of educational leadership, from strategies that inspire your staff to insights that shape your students' futures. We're here to sharpen your skills, amplify your talents, and ignite your impact. So grab your coffee, a notebook, and most importantly, your growth mindset as we embark on a journey to redefine what it means to lead with purpose and passion. This isn't just a podcast, it's professional development. Let's build better schools together, one episode at a time. Now, here's your host, Principal JL. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational Leadership with Principal JL podcast. I kind of took a couple weeks off here. I had a lot of things to think about, especially for this episode. Something that, is really kind of personal to me, because over the past 3 years as a principal of the high school that I'm at, I've been faced with unimaginable death of a student. Not just once, not twice, but I've had to work through 4 different student deaths in the past 3 years as a principal. So in today's episode, I really wanted to talk about, how we responded. How did the crisis team respond? What did that look like? This is something that, you'd never want to go through as a principal. It's something as a leader that we have to be ready for in case that happens. But really, there's some things that really are getting to me that I feel like I need to share out, but also, maybe help someone that is in this role on how to manage through those crises as a building principal, because they're not fun. I mean, this sucks. This is something, like I said, I've done, 4 times in the last 3 years. But also, even in my last principalship, I had to deal with a student death. And so a lot of the things that, as a principal, that I've done and learned through this process, I just wanted to share out, because I hope that you never have to go through these things. But at the same time, there is right ways and wrong ways to work through these unimaginable crises that not just your students go through, but your faculty will go through. And wanted to kind of really talk to you guys about that. With these experiences, they've reshaped the way I kind of view things. With crisis management, most importantly, the role we play is supporting the mental health of students, staff, and the community. The reality of crisis in schools, according to the CDC, suicide is the second leading cause of death among individuals between the age of 10 to 24 in the United States. In 2021 alone, over 6,600 youth in that age range died by suicide. The numbers are not just statistics, they represent faces, stories, and futures of students that are no longer here. And so that's important to think about. These kids are finding permanent solutions to temporary problems. And so that's really hard for us as adults to really wrap our minds around. But that's what we're working through. And for me, out of these 4 deaths, we had one that was a car accident. And then 3 were really by suicide. And that's really hard, to really come to terms with, because as a building principal, we do the trainings with our staff. We are, taking preemptive measures. We have supports in place to help these students. And so for us, with these situations, we're really puzzled by, why couldn't we see the signs? Why couldn't we prevent these things from happening? And that really makes you step back and think kind of what we're doing, what can we do better, and how can we help intervene before students get to that part. And I take those things very seriously, and I take those things to heart because I never want anybody to have to go through these tragedies the way that we have had over the past 3 years. So, I'm going to kind of talk about how our crisis team responds, kind of who's involved, what have we done to kind of support not just the students but also the faculty members and community members that go through this. So, you know, we look at schools as being a safe place. We have look at schools as, they're immune to tragedies, but we aren't. Life happens, things happen, and we have to be able to respond to those crises when they do happen. And really for us, I would say we respond very, very well. And unfortunately, we respond well because we've done it. But at the same time, we respond well because we have a great people that work through these things, and we have a process, we have things in place that helps us manage these crises when they do happen. So if you don't have a crisis response team, I would say you need to develop one. And for us, we're a bigger district, so we have multiple layers to our crisis response team. And it really does start with our superintendent. Our superintendent's going to get notified. And what that notification, the superintendent will then reach out to the building principal and said, "Hey, this has happened. I'm going to get the crisis team involved." And for us, we have two different crisis teams. And we do that because we don't want the same people responding to a crisis every time. We're a big enough district, we can do that. But in smaller districts, you may have the same people responding to crises as they come up. So with that, the superintendent will initiate the crisis team. We'll actually get together and we will get the facts together. Our biggest thing as our response with the crisis team is to really collect the facts, get things together. And these are the people that are on our crisis team response. We have our superintendent, the building principal that is affected by, that students in their building, that building principal is a part of that. We have school counselors from that building as well, but we also have school counselors from other buildings that will come in to help support. We bring in mental health professionals from around the community, but also from other school districts. We have our community liaison are part of that team. And we also have our regional ESU 9 team that will come in and help support our school when we go through a crisis. So when the student, when something happens to a student and they pass away from a tragic death of some sort, we get notified. The superintendent, like I said, will get things rolling. And then our goal is to, meet quickly as soon as possible so we can get the facts. We want to verify facts because that's the information we want to get out to our faculty, to our students, to our parents and guardians, so they know what's going on. Because I guarantee you with social media, things are going to be out there. People are going to be talking about it. And so we want to try to respond in a way that says, "Hey, we are aware. Here's some facts. This is how we're going to respond." And so that's really important to keep track of as you do this. And so the first thing we do after we verify facts is we try to identify who's affected the most. Who are this student's friends? Their family members, siblings, teachers. We try to figure out who's going to be mostly affected, who has a deep relationship with that student. And we want to be able to try to identify those people so we can provide supports for them through this crisis so they are supported as well. And then we want to develop a response plan. And kind of what we do with our response plan is we want to get out information to different sets of people. We have our faculty, we have our students, and then we have our parents. And we are very careful on how we word the information. We don't want to use words, even though we know that the student death was, maybe a suicide at that time. We don't want to utilize words like suicide when we are talking about. We just talk about we have a death of this student. We are very saddened by it. Here's the supports and here's the things we're going to have in place for students. These are the supports. These are the things we're going to have in place for our faculty. And so I think it's really important to be very detailed with that information, and every situation's different. And so what you put into that, what we utilize is emails to get out to faculty, get out to students and teachers, but we do it in stages. So we will notify our faculty first to kind of let them know what's going on. Then we'll notify the parents and guardians and then let them know. And then after that, we wait till the next day to notify students to kind of let them know what's going on. But we also want to let parents and guardians know so they can prepare their students for the coming school day when those things.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, amazing educational leaders. If you're finding value in this podcast, learning new insights, getting inspired, or just nodding along thinking, yep, I needed that, then why keep it to yourself? Share this podcast with a colleague, a fellow school leader, or a teacher that is inspiring into leadership. Send them a link, post about it, or just casually drop, hey, you need this in your life the next time you see them. Let's grow this community of game-changing educators together, because great leadership isn't a solo act, it's a movement. Now, back to the show. So what we also do that, sounds cold and cruel is we actually take the student out of our system. We mark them with a deceased. And the reason why we do that is we don't want to have a faculty member come in and see that student's name or see their picture in their roster. We want to reduce the amount of things that could trigger a faculty member to have, to think like, oh my gosh, this is real. This is, this student's no longer here. We don't want to have that. We want to try to make, that process as streamlined as possible so we don't have unnecessary triggers. And that's kind of why we do that. And that's the part that I think sucks the most, is when we have to do those things. The thing is we develop plans for the day after something like this happens. So some things that we do is we bring in, multiple counseling teams. We have teams, like I said, from our ESU, from other local school districts, as well as people within our school districts that will be a part of that day. And so what we do is we have different rooms to where we have overflow of kids come into the counseling office. We can have them go to different people to get the support they need so they could talk out their feelings and different things like that. The things you got to remember is these events may trigger a student or a faculty member of a trauma that they've had in their past. And a lot of times that does happen to where, when you have a death of a student, it could trigger, hey, I remember when, this family member, this happened in my family, and that brings those traumas back to not just students, but the faculty members. So I think it's really important to make sure you have supports for your students, but also have supports for your faculty member. So for students, what we do is we have more counselors that will follow that student's schedule to check in with those classrooms, check in with those teachers, check in with those students that had classes with that student, so we can make sure that they're okay and they understand there's people here to help them. The other thing we do is if we tell our faculty, what we'll do is I'll have a meeting with faculty. I'll give them the facts, even though I send an email, I'll talk to them about, hey, these are the supports we have. These are the things we want to be able to do. We want to try to make school as normal as possible, but it's okay to let kids kind of grieve, let kids talk about it, but yet it's okay for faculty members to grieve. And if they need support, we have people that are in the building that will actually step into their room so they can decompress and get out and get themselves to a spot where they can go back and and do the work that they need to do. It becomes a very long and tough day, but we have a lot of supports in place to do that. And I always want to make my staff know that we know that you're human too, and you're going to grieve. You're going to have feelings about what's going on. And if you need support, let us know because we'll get that support to you. And if you need to talk to somebody, here's some things we can do to help support that. So I think that's another piece too, is taking care of your staff as well as your students. And for me, one thing that I do is I try to get to my staff members. I will go to the staff members with the student, check in on them, and then I try to check in on all the other staff members to make sure they're doing okay, see where they're at, make sure if they need support, and those things like that. So that's really important that I do as a building principal, is to make sure my staff is okay as well as the students when it comes down to it. And if a staff member sees a student struggling and the student needs support, we send them to the counseling office, and from there the counselors will get them to a person to help them get the support they need, especially if we have a lot of people coming in that are, that are upset and grieving through that process. I think that's really, really important to do as well. With that, as a principal, these things are tough. I had to learn to like take care of myself too. I can't just, I worry about my staff, I worry about my students, but I did a lot of reflecting on this last one. I mean, it wasn't very long ago that we had to assemble a crisis team due to a student death. And really, I thought a lot. And that's why I kind of stepped away the last couple of weeks from podcasting, because this just bothered me. I didn't understand why we have this happening. Why did we have these types of deaths over the last 3 years? And here's some things I want to share with you. We are in a mental health crisis. We're not just in an academic crisis. We're in a mental health crisis. So we have students that struggle with academics, but we also have students that are struggling with their mental health. In a 2021 survey by the National Center for Education Statistics, 70% of public schools report an increase in students seeking mental health services, and 76% of students report staff voicing concerns about students' depression, anxiety, and trauma. And that comes back in 2022. Not very long ago, those statistics are true. And here's the challenge that I have for you guys. We train our faculty to recognize signs of distress. We train them. I know because I go through the training. I know what the signs are. I know what they are. But my next thing is, are we training our students? Do we need to train our students to understand those same signs and distresses that we can recognize as faculty members? Because let's think about it. We can only see so much and do so much with what we have, but guess who is that first line of defense? It's our students. And so what if we trained our students on how to recognize the signs and how to handle those things? Because sometimes teenagers or students are the first ones to see their peer in crisis, but they don't always know what to do. They don't always understand that what seems like to be the end of a temporary problem is a permanent solution. Their brains are still developing. They have prefrontal cortexes as the part of the responsibility for long-term planning and rational decision making. Their prefrontal cortex is not all the way developed until they're about age 25. That's why teens see permanent solutions to temporary problems. And how can we fix that? How can we teach our kids to recognize the signs, get an adult involved? How can we intervene as teachers before it's too late, or as educators? Can we empower students to help with that so they could speak up and support each other, so we as adults can help intervene quicker? I don't know if that's a solution, but that's something I've been thinking about a lot. I would like to invite you guys to collaborate on this. I don't have all the answers, but I'm asking questions. I'm trying to figure this out. As educational leaders, we need to figure out how can we help our students recognize these things so maybe we can try to prevent some of these tragedies from happening. With that, guys, I hope that you guys reach out, and if you guys have ideas on things about, how we can get better at trying to help our students so we don't have these things, I'd love to hear from you. I have the fan mail link that you can just send to me. Hey, I have this idea, and I'd really like to hear from you. And I'd like to connect with you on solutions to this issue that I've seen grow over the last 4 or 5 years as a principal. So I thank you guys for listening to this very deeply personal episode. And if you take anything away from this conversation, let it be this. Leadership in times of crisis is not about having all the answers. It's about showing up with compassion, clarity, and the courage to ask the hard questions. It's how do I show up for my faculty? How do I show up for my students? How do I show up in a way that I'm supporting them through this crisis? That's important to remember. But also, you need to take care of yourself as well. I hope you guys will reach out and give me ideas on how I can help my students so we are not going through these crises anymore. And honestly, I'm tired of having to uh, work through a crisis team, and I'm really hoping that we can figure out solutions so we can help our students so they don't feel like they have to have a permanent solution to a temporary issue. And so with that said, guys, I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you guys are finding ways to help your students emotionally. And till next time, take care of yourself and take care of one another. Thank you for sticking around to the very end of this episode. I hope this podcast brings value to you as an educational leader. I would invite you to share this podcast with other educational leaders, or maybe that inspiring teacher who would like to be an educational leader someday. I would also invite you to subscribe and to follow this podcast so you can get the most recent updated episodes when they drop. I would also love it if you leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars, because that would make this podcast more discoverable to other educators like yourself. You can also follow me on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, Threads, and Substack. All you need to do is look for Principal JO, and boom, there I am. This is where we can continue the conversations from the episodes that you have enjoyed. I am so thankful for you guys for listening. Until next time, always be 1% better.